Welcome to 5 cool things that I found along my way that I want to share with you. These are things that I found as I am just living my life and upgrading who I'm being, things that have helped me, things that entertain me, things that excite me. They include books or movies or TV shows or music I'm listening to that I figured I'd share with the world. And if you're listening, you might be interested in too and checking out. And also, I would love to hear from you if you have things that are thrilling you and you want to share with me that I can share with others. So feel free to email me or DM me. Each of these live broadcasts, I turn into a blog post on my website, robertzeitlin.com, and you can find it there, and I'll always put a link at the bottom where you can reach out and contact me. So the first thing that's really exciting me right now is something that I've watched for hours and hours and hours. My family makes fun of me, and I've actually gone back to watch it again. It's a very lengthy documentary on the Beatles. And what it is a retelling of this classic story of one of the last chapters of their time together, the Let It Be time, if you will. And I'm crazy about it, even though I'm not like a huge Beatles fan. This is clearly one of the most important musical collaborations and bands in history, but I didn't grow up like loving the Beatles. I didn't have older siblings or parents sort of shoving their albums on me. And, it was in the air and I picked it up along the way. There are a couple songs that an uncle turned me on to, like Blackbird. But overall, I was like, Beatles, you could kind of take it or leave it. This story, however, is so compelling. So as someone who grew up, my parents listened to like 70s music, soft rock kind of music, like the Carpenters or Neil Diamond or the like Helen Reddy, sort of like progressive, sort of post 60s hippie kind of like feminist vibe. But it was really radio that shaped my musical tastes. I didn't remember how much 70s soft rock infiltrated and was hardwired into my brain until I found a station on Sirius XM called Yacht Rock. And one day I was in the worst mood and I turned on that station and started to listen. And within like 3 to 4 songs, first of all, I knew every word. When I say hardwired, I am shocked that like it's all in there. These are songs I haven't heard in years. And by the end of like 3 or 4 songs, my mood had completely lifted. So it's a great station if you're, I guess, my age and listen to a lot of radio. But it's also important to see how much the Beatles influenced everything back then, and still influence. Like I hear echoes of McCartney and Lennon's songwriting and musical influence on like one of my early loves in the 80s of ELO, which just came up again now that Olivia Newton-John recently died, because they collaborated on a movie called Xanadu. So Electric Light Orchestra had a lot of sort of Beatles vibe and some sort of a little bit of psychedelic edge to it. And then it kept progressing, and I found other bands like XTC in the 90s or Crowded House. Michael Penn sounded a lot like the Beatles, and beyond, all the way up into like the aughts, like in the 90s and aughts with like bands like Jet. Anyway, what I love about this documentary is that Peter, I'm forgetting his last name, the director of all the Hobbit movies, did an incredible job of sifting through thousands and thousands of hours in material to retell a story that was originally told in a movie called Let It Be, where there was a very clear cut, this is the dissolution of an important band. And a lot of blame went on to Yoko Ono, who was with John Lennon. And there was a very simple, clear story, but it didn't really account for the fact that this was a very complicated bunch of relationships and people that had been working together for 10, 15 years and creating together, creating some amazing music. So having that music in the back of my mind, it wasn't so much hardwired like the yacht rock music, but it definitely was in there. And so when you're watching essentially the sausage being made and they're like playing around a piano and they're like fumbling through lyrics that haven't even been created yet. And they're like, oh, what do you think of this? And they're like, I don't know. And George Harrison will bring in a song. He wasn't the primary songwriter for the Beatles, but he'll bring in a song and they'll crap on it. And then next thing you know, it's on the album, or it turns onto one of his albums and it's one of his classic songs. This is just an incredible creative period for them that's captured on film because they were making this documentary, Let It Be. And so this is a documentary about the making of that documentary, a documentary that takes in all the film and all the material collected during that time. And he breaks it into 3 very large segments. I think they're like 2 3-hour films. So part 1s, 2 and 3, and parts 1, 2, and 3. And you see the sort of the ebb and flow. At one point, one of the members quits, and they have to go and like sort of pull him back into the band. There's a lot of talk about how this show that they're creating is going to be a live TV event, and then it's not. And they end up in this classic concert on a rooftop in the middle of London, unannounced, and they get all this street response to it. People who are like, "Oh my gosh, it's the Beatles," or "I can hardly hear them," or "It's a nuisance, they shouldn't be allowed up there." Eventually, the cops come in and break it up. Anyway, this documentary is inspiring to me because you get to see how some really passionate, creative people just keep plugging along and creating new opportunities and developing ideas until they turn into something. One of the exciting things in the documentary is when they're playing a song that's very familiar, and you're like, that sounds like the recording, and then they do another take, and then the little text comes in the bottom. This is the recording that ended up on the album. And it's like, whoa, you get to see like the whole process. For me, it's fascinating as someone who's creative and also has, developed more trust in my creative process, so that when there's a lull, I recognize that's going to come and that's going to go. When I feel like really inspired, I can tell when something's going on. And also, you can't always tell when something's going to land. And, no musician really knows when they're creating a hit, but here they are creating hit after hit after hit. And it's just like they're just pumping them out. And it's crazy to watch because it's a really cool behind the scenes look. Anyway, that's one thing that's exciting me. Another thing I mentioned last time that's really exciting me is something called the Carbon Almanac. And I'll talk about the AltMBA in a minute, but basically I'm familiar with a lot of people who helped put together this book because I'm a member of this community. That's the result of this work that Seth Godin put in to create the AltMBA. I might as well tell you what that is first. So the AltMBA is a short but very intense program. It's a 30-day sprint through 14 different challenges. And it's considered an alt or alternate MBA, like a Master's of Business Administration, because it's really business focused, but that's not really what the material. The material really is up-leveling your personal development and your leadership skills and learning new tricks. And so some of these new tricks were putting stuff out in the universe that might or might not work. And so a lot of people from that community and others started to put their heads together about one of the biggest, probably the biggest concern that we have right now, which is the change in the climate and the climate crisis. And one of the things they recognized was that there's a lot of disagreement about, is this a crisis? Isn't it? What are the facts? Things get debated back and forth. And you can stand back and cross your arms and say, science is science. But unless you deliver it in a way that makes sense to people, you're just, it's just a tagline, science is science. So what they did with 300 collaborators is to create an almanac that's talking about the facts of the science, the facts of climate change, the facts of carbon emissions. And they labeled it the Carbon Almanac. And the cool part about it, I mentioned last week, is that they didn't just launch the book, but they also launched it along with 4 podcasts and a way of getting out and creating book signing events across the globe. They actually created the Guinness World Record for the largest book signing ever, which happened about a month ago, because all these collaborators went to their local bookstores with Carbon Almanacs, and everyone signed books for people who were coming to the book signing. So they created basically the largest book signing in history. The Carbon Almanac is a very impressive compendium of all the science and facts in a very digestible way, something that is easy to understand, teach. There are copies available for educational institutions for free. Get in touch with me if you have an interest in doing that, because I can connect you with my friend Margot, who's in charge of that distribution channel. And check out the 4 podcasts. I'll put all the links in the entry that I do in my blog on my website, so you can get to the podcast, you can get to the book itself. I highly recommend it. It's a very impressive effort. While we're at it, let me give a shout out to the AltMBA. I'm not sure if the next session's deadline has passed, but if you're curious about that and you want to know more, I'll put the link in here, altmba.com. And if you're curious beyond that and you want to reach out to me, I'd be happy to tell you about my experience. It's a very powerful program. And for me, what I learned was very powerful, and the people I met along the way and the people I've met since then have changed the course of things in my life. So let's change channel a little bit, because we're going back to England. There's an album that I've been listening to, which is the new or second full album, I would say, from an artist named Biba Doobie. And Biba Doobie is an artist out of England, but also the Philippines. And her new album is Beatopia. And I just have been listening to it, and it's starting to get into my brain the way her first album, Fake It Flowers, did. It's the songwriting is amazing. She's very conscientious. She's a young artist, but also starting to be compared to incredible songwriters like Elliott Smith. And what she's able to do here, collaborating with her new band and finding new ways to express herself, is really powerful. Beatopia is a really cool concept. I heard in an interview with her on Apple Music with Matt Wilkinson about the birth of that idea. And the idea actually came to her at 7 years old in school, when she was obviously thinking about a lot of things and school was a little bit boring. And what she did was she created her whole own universe, Beatopia. Her name is Beatrice. Biba Doobie is her stage name. And so she created Beatopia, and she mapped it out, and she drew this whole poster with different planets and different language and all this stuff. And then unfortunately she went to the bathroom, came back, and the teacher had found it and put it up on the board and made fun of her, and she forgot about it. She suppressed it. It was so traumatizing, this experience, that she put it essentially in a box and locked it away. And she actually didn't even remember it for 10, 15 years until recently, when she was in the studio creating new music for possibly an album, possibly some other project. And the idea came back to her, and it started to fill the space. And the songs that came out of that collaboration are fantastic. I highly recommend it. Beatopia by Biba Doobie. And the last thing that I have to share is another exciting new direction, not a London Philippine connection, but a Marvel universe connection with a Pakistani Muslim young hero from Jersey City. And the show is called Ms. Marvel. And it's relatively new out. This is Marvel's new effort to do a new generation of TV shows. And this comic book, Ms. Marvel, is an opportunity to showcase a whole other side and a whole other culture. And they're really taking the TV show to that great length. They're showing a whole side of Pakistani culture, including taking us on a field trip to a version of Karachi. I don't think it's really Karachi, but I think it's a made-for-TV version of Karachi that includes a great amount of culture and history, a lot of family dynamics, and a lot of showing the Jersey City version of Pakistani family and also their roots in Pakistan. The show is great. The young star is fantastic. I highly recommend it. Marvel is making efforts to diversify. When finally they released and went for Black Panther, and now in the recent Doctor Strange movie, they have a Latinx hero, America, and now here they have Ms. Marvel, which I highly recommend. So those are 5 things that are fun that I'm watching and listening to, and I thought you might be interested in it. I will put links to everything on a blog post on my website if you want to check it out. And there you can also contact me if you have other things that you want to share with me just for fun, or you'd like me to share with others and check out. So I will see you there.